Hello crafty friends, it's Alicia here with a project for Tailored Expressions. In today's video, I'm going to be showing you how to make a set of 4 birthday cards with a little extra sparkle. The main stars of today's cards are the new Celebrate in Style Create Quads with coordinating dies and the Fantastic Birthday Sentiment Set with coordinating dies. Some other items I'll be featuring is the splatter background stamp, glitter drip drops in green, teal, and pink, and the Frame in Frame 3 cutting plate. For cardstocks, I got out Tropical Punch, Jelly Donut, Kiwi, Sugar Cube, and some hot pink glitter. Not pictured, I will also be using some TE Vellum. For ink blending and some stamping, I'll be using Tropical Punch, Jelly Donut, Lime Zest, and Dragon Fruit. And I also got out the coordinating color blender brushes. To get a nice impression on my stamping, I got out the exclusive TE Teal Misty and Just Press tool, and I'll be doing some sparkly embossing, so I pulled out Versamark ink, diamond embossing powder, the anti-static powder tool, and of course the Sizzix heat tool. Finally, to hold everything together, I'll be using a variety of adhesives. Let's get crafty! I'm going to get started with the stenciling, so I got out my inks, brushes, the layering stencil set, and a piece of sugar cube that I cut down to 8 inches by 10.5 inches. The stencils are all numbered. You don't have to, but I did start with stencil number 1, and I'll be using the Dragon Fruit ink. To help my piece of sugar cube stay securely in place, I put some tape runner on the back and removed just a little bit of tack with my fingers. Each of the Create in Quad stencils has an etched line that helps you place it around that slightly trimmed down piece of cardstock. So I took a minute to get mine in place, and then to hold this down, I pulled in a couple pieces of the Post-it removable labeling tape, and now I'm going to mark the corners with a pencil and the little alignment squares. This way, when I go to place the second stencil, this is a good starting point to help me get everything aligned. Once that is all in place, I start the ink blending. After I get some ink on my brush, I like to use clockwise and counterclockwise motions to fill in all of the areas, and I just keep going until I like the shade of color that I have down and everything looks pretty much nice and even. For stencil number 2, I will be using Tropical Punch ink, and I start by lining up my stencil with the marks I previously made with the pencil. Now you might need to adjust it just a little bit to get it to your liking. Once it is in place, I'm going to do the same process for ink blending with the blue ink, and it's again being held in place by those 2 pieces of removable tape. I use this same process for the remaining 2 inks, which are Jelly Donut and Lime Zest. And now for my favorite part, the big reveal. I am loving these colors together. How about you? Some of my favorites are those clear confetti balloons and that big, huge cupcake. Let me know your favorite down in the comment section. Off camera, I cut my stenciled piece in quarters. Now the pieces that have color bleed, I did cut them down just a little bit more. I'm going to be stamping my sentiments onto a scrap of sugar cube cardstock with Tropical Punch ink. Once I have my piece of cardstock down in the lower right hand of the Misty, I did make sure to hold it in place with the magnet because I'm going to be doing some double stamping, so I want it to be nice and secure. I picked up the 4 chosen sentiment stamps with the door of my Misty and then inked it up with the Tropical Punch. To help me get a nice crisp image, I did bring in the Just Press tool, and now I have 4 beautiful sentiments, but I want to do a little something extra. So I'm going to leave that sugar cube cardstock right where it is, clean off the stamps and dry it well, and now I'm going to bring in the Versamark ink, the diamond embossing powder, and the anti-static powder tool. What I'm going to do is double stamp these sentiments, and the second time I do that, I will be heat embossing it with that diamond embossing powder so there's a little bit of shine and some sparkle from the glitter in the powder. I did make sure to rub my anti-static powder tool over the cardstock so that powder only sticks to where I want it to. I do go ahead and ink up and stamp the sentiments twice just to get that nice and juicy, and then I pour the embossing powder twice over my cardstock. Since there isn't a whole lot of glitter, this does just help me get a little more. Then once I have set that powder with the heat tool, I have these gorgeous, shiny, sparkly sentiments. The last step before card assembly is to cut out the sentiments using the coordinating dies. For card number 1, I'll be using the piece with the 9 cupcakes and cutting it out with the coordinating die plate. I did make sure to keep the negative part, the part with the little confetti, which is also super cute, because I will be using that later. Off camera, I added foam tape to 8 of the cupcakes, leaving the center one without because I'm going to replace that with the It's Your Day sentiment with some foam tape on the back. Off camera, I cut a piece of kiwi cardstock to 4 by 5 and a quarter, and I used a splatter background to add some texture and a little bit more festiveness to it. I brought back in the negative piece from the die cutting, and I used a couple pieces of removable tape to temporarily tack this to the stamped piece. I'm going to be using this to help me place the cupcakes where they would have been had I left it the stenciled piece. So I added some liquid glue to the back of the foam just so I had a little bit of wiggle time to get it aligned, and then I got the 8 cupcakes placed around the outside. Finally, after that had dried, I carefully pulled back the placement guide, and then I added the It's Your Day sentiment to the center. I added this piece to a top fold sugar cube card base, and so I didn't waste that 9th cupcake, I added it to the inside for a little extra decoration. For the second card, I will be using the piece with the big cupcake, and I took this off screen with the colossal cake die to cut it out. Once again, I did make sure to keep the negative, and this time I'm actually going to use it on the card front too. To add some extra sparkle to this card, I cut a piece of hot pink glitter cardstock to 4 by 5 and a quarter, and I'm going to be adding the negative frame centered onto this. For the second card, I chose the Eat Big Cake sentiment. I thought that was appropriate for the image, and I added that centered to the bottom of the image. While that was drying off camera, I added foam tape to the back, and I added the background to a top fold sugar cube card base. Once I had the release paper pulled on the foam tape, once again I added some liquid glue. Now when I go to place this one down, I'm not going to place it exactly where the die cut was cut out from. Instead, I'm going to move it up and to the right just a little bit. That way when it's in place, you can still see some of the sparkle from underneath it from the front of the card. For card number 3, I am using the balloon background, and I cut it just a little smaller than before to 3 3/4 by 5. I also cut a piece of jelly donut cardstock to 4 by 5 1/4, and this will be a mat for the balloon piece. But before I add that to the back, I'm going to use the second from largest frame from the frame in frame 3 cutting plate to cut a frame that goes on the top. This way I have a mat from the purple cardstock, the frame, and then that centerpiece I'm going to save for another project later. I cut a piece of vellum to go behind the purple frame. Because that background is so busy and I want to help my sentiment stand out, the vellum's going to allow you to still see that gorgeous background, but it mutes it just a little bit so the sentiment can pop. I used the same liquid glue to get the purple mat added to my stenciled balloons. I did make sure to put it right near the opening so none of the glue would show. And then before I leave it to dry for a little bit, I'm going to go ahead and add the sentiment to the front center of the vellum piece, and then I let those dry for about 5 minutes. After they were dried, I added foam tape to the back of the purple frame and behind the sentiment on the vellum. This way, if the card gets pressed down in the center, there will be something to keep it popped up off the card. Now, before I place this onto the stenciled background, which I had put on a top fold sugar cube card base, I'm going to go ahead and add some more liquid glue so I can adjust it just right. For the fourth and final card, I brought in the piece with the 3 balloons and the balloon bash die set. Off camera, I cut a hot pink glitter balloon, and then the full strip or the full tassel string I cut from Tropical Punch. Now this has a very fun feature that full string has some little slits in it, so you can add individual tassels in different colors. How fun is that? When I place the individual tassels, I work from bottom to top so I can still see the next slit after I've already got one in place. I do kind of pre-open each of the slits with my fingernails. If you don't have any, you could carefully use a piercing tool, just something to get it started. Then I pull the purple tassel in as far as it will go and add a dot of glue on the back underneath that little tab. I continued next with the green tassel, and then I went to the glittery pink. Now, because the glitter cardstock is a little thinner, I did have to be a little bit more gentle and help it pull it through. I continued in this same process until each of the slits had a little tassel. Once the tassel had dried, I added a foam sticky strip to the back. Not only will it help pop this piece up off the card, but it also keeps all of those little tassels in place. I got this added over on the right side. I try to center it between the 2 stenciled tassels, and then I got the sentiment and my glitter balloon added, both of which were also on foam tape. Finally, to finish off all the cards, I got out some glitter drip drops in pink, green, and teal, and I added a few to each of the card fronts. And here are some close-up looks at the finished set. Thank you so much for taking the time to watch today's video. If you enjoyed the process, a thumbs up is appreciated. And if you're not already a subscriber, we do hope you'll click on the button below so you're the first to know about our latest videos. To find out more about the products I used today, you can check out the links in the description box or visit the Tailored Expressions online store at tailoredexpressions.com.